series. We will get started in approximately 1 minute. We will get started in 1 minute. Thank you for joining. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will get started in approximately 30 seconds. We still have some people who are joining. We will get started in just a few seconds. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started since we do like to keep our webinars to 1 hour, and we have some exciting presentations and emerging practice to bring to you today. My name is Jessica Gorham, and I am the Regional Emergency GBV Advisor working on behalf of the Gender-Based Violence Area of Responsibility. I'm based here in Nairobi at UNFPA. But for the purpose of this event, I'm also the co-chair of the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. I'm excited to have you all here today for our June edition of our Emerging Practice webinar series. Each month, we like to present some emerging practice from some of our partner organizations, whether at regional level or country level. And today I'm really pleased to present that we will have speakers from Trocare. We have Laurel Barraza, who is the Regional GBV Prevention and Social Norms Advisor. Laurel is based in Harare and is working for Trocare. And then following Laurel, today we will have also Dr. Lydia Mwaniki, who is the Director of Gender and Women at All Africa Conferences of Churches. She will also be joining us, and we're really excited because I think their experiences really complement each other. Before we get started, and I hand it over to the chairs of our intersectionality pillar, I would like to remind our participants of some of our rules. Everybody will remain muted throughout the webinar. If you would like to ask a question, please do write your question in the chat. My colleagues and I will be monitoring the chat throughout, and we will then group questions together and pose them to the appropriate speaker during the Q&A at the end. So please do write your questions in the chat. Also, we are requesting that everyone please turn off your videos. We do have colleagues who are joining us from many different countries throughout the region and the world, and we recognize that they have different bandwidths. So if you could please keep your videos off, and you will be muted throughout so that we can capture all the questions. Also, please do note that recordings of this webinar and all of our previous webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. You simply need to go to YouTube, put in the search engine GBV AOR, and then you'll find a recording of this webinar and all of our previous events over the past few years. So we will not be sharing the PowerPoints because you'll be able to look at them and learn more if you need to through our YouTube channel. All right, I think I'm going to turn it over to the chairs of our intersectionality pillar, George Odway from Population Council, and we also have Karen Williams, who is from the GBV AOR here in East and Southern Africa. George, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and hello, everyone. So as Jessica mentioned, the intersectionality pillar is one of those pillars of the Eastern and Southern Africa GBV working group. And membership includes quite diverse members, including about 12 international and regional NGO represented. And currently, UNFPA and Population Council co-chairs the intersectionality pillar. Karen and myself are the co-leads of this particular pillar. Just briefly about the activities that we are doing. First, the aim of the intersectionality pillar is basically to provide support to field and regional GBV practitioners, as well as researchers on intersectionality as a tool or a framework to be able to analyze and understand the intersection of gender with other inequalities in the context of addressing GBV against all. So we usually have a number of activities, and one of the activities is basically organizing these cross-learning events, such as this webinar. And this year, we made it a key activity on looking at the intersectionality related to issues within the region, and particularly looking at GBV and religion. And we recognize the pivotal role of faith leaders in terms of preventing and responding to GBV. And so we look forward to a very interesting participation and also learning through this emerging practice webinar this month. This is just one of the series of the webinars on this important topic. And we will also have another broader webinar next month, and be on the lookout for registration as well as the link to join that particular webinar. So I do take this opportunity to welcome all of you and thank you for joining. Thank you, and over to you, Jessica.
Thanks, George. So appreciated. Without any further delay, I will turn it over to our speaker from Trocaire, and joining us from Harare, over to you, Laurel.
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Today, I'm going to share with you how we as Trocaire and our partners have been working with religious leaders to prevent violence against women. Next slide, please. So we have been engaging religious leaders through a social norms change methodology called SASA Faith. SASA Faith is whereby religious leaders, we work mainly with religious leaders from the Muslim and Christian communities, and this is what we term the faith communities. So in SASA Faith, religious leaders and their faith communities come together to discuss issues around violence against women and come up with solutions. SASA itself is a Swahili term that means now, representing the agency for people to talk about and to end violence against women. It's also an acronym for the 4 phases that are there within the SASA faith life cycle, which has to be done in a minimum of 3 years. So in the start phase, which represent the first S, the religious leaders and their faith communities are taken through a process where they discover their power within, where they, the women and the adolescent girls in particularly, taken through a process of building their confidence, finding their voice and their agency. And in the awareness phase, which is the second phase, the communities go through sessions where they interrogate the use of power. They look at who has power, how they're using their power, and possible solutions for how couples and the faith communities and the broader communities can balance their power. In the third phase, which is called the support phase, we take the faith communities through a process of identifying how they can best support survivors of violence against women and gender-based violence, and also ensuring that there is adequate use of the GBV referral pathway. In the fourth phase of SASA faith, which is called the action phase, is where the communities identify advocacy issues that they need to be addressed within their faith communities, within the broader communities and institutions that they work with. Next slide, please. So SASA Faith looks at changing social norms through 4 outcomes: the change in knowledge, in attitudes, skills, and behaviors. In knowledge, we're looking at increasing knowledge on violence against women, on gender-based violence. We're also looking at how religious communities can look at unbiased interpretation of religious texts. So that would be the Bible in the Christian communities, the Quran and the Hadith in the Muslim communities. We also increase knowledge on the GBV referral pathway. Religion has often been fingered as perpetuating gender-based violence and suppressing survivors of GBV. Religious leaders have been fingered for asking survivors to pray about everything. But within SASA Faith, we look at how to integrate prayer with also practical solutions like the GBV referral pathway. And then, like I said, we also increase the agency and voice of women and older adolescents. In terms of attitudes, religious leaders and their faith communities look at how they can change their feelings and beliefs about violence against women by using the faith values of justice, peace, and dignity, and also normalizing conversations about GBV within the faith space. We also look to strengthen and support the support that women experience violence get from the faith communities, and enhancing religious leaders' ability to provide preventative teachings through pre- and post-marital counseling and other mandates that they have, and other gatherings that they meet the various participants within their church. And we also provide technical support for religious leaders to do a survivor-centered response. And then in terms of behaviors, SASA Faith influences how people behave within the choose to act, and we promote gender equitable attitudes and behaviors, also enhancing how faith activities are done in a way that prevents gender-based violence. Next slide, please. So why do we work with religious leaders? Because religious leaders have the power, they have the voice to guide their faith communities through justice, peace, and dignity. Religious leaders have a ready audience. And in most of the countries where we work, most of the population, they subscribe to a certain religion, be it Christian or Muslim, and the religious leaders are held in high regard. So we believe in their influence, we believe in that they are revered, and So we harness this power also so that they can guide everyone in the faith space. And with everyone, we mean the men, the women, the boys and the girls, even through Sunday school, we ensure that our sessions reach out to everybody in the faith community. Next slide, please. And so we also ensure that religious leaders encourage reflection and open discussion and build awareness and understanding of violence against women, and also create systems of support within their faith space and within the communities where the faith community members are coming from. And we also believe in social diffusion, that eventually the message will reach the society as a whole. And then there's also the aspect of joining together and taking action. Next slide, please. So through our engagements with the religious leaders, we have seen that there has been inspiration for local activism. We have seen religious leaders taking a lot of action within their faith space, raising awareness, sometimes also getting us into spaces that are ordinary, that would not be ordinarily open to civic society because of their buying into our programs. Next slide, please. We have also worked with religious leaders to engage the key custodians. Usually women in church leadership also have been seen to be gatekeepers in some scenarios of the religious doctrines that perpetuate gender-based violence. But our engagements with them has opened up the space so that women and girls can have conversations openly within the church, and also the broader faith community can talk about gender-based violence. And we've managed to have commitments from the women in church leadership themselves to ensure that there is adequate support that is provided for the women in the faith spaces. Next slide, please. We've also capacitated religious leaders to support women on other stakeholder engagements. So we believe that as much as we work within the faith space, in the churches, in the mosques, there's also the broader society that needs to be engaged. And the religious leaders then capacitate the women in their faith spaces to engage probably the police, the health sector, and all other players within the GBV referral pathway for any advocacy issues that they may require. Next slide, please. We've also looked at one major aspect that is usually raised when we talk about religion and gender-based violence, which is the interpretation of the religious text. So time and again, we meet with the religious leaders and have theological reflections and have contextual Bible studies, whereby we look at how they can interpret the Bible in the correct way, and how they can look at the Bible with a gender lens in order to adequately provide sound teachings when they get on the pulpit. And this has resulted in many families coming together. This has resulted in many women actually finding their belief more in how the Bible can support, and how the Bible and the Quran and the Hadith support justice and peace and dignity for the communities. Next slide, please. We've also taken the religious leaders on how they can enhance survivor-centered response in the faith spaces, especially when they provide counseling to couples, be it premarital counseling or counseling during the subsistence of the marriage, and how they have different activities for the couples, how best they usually, we have seen that when the women go to the religious leaders, they will report that usually the counseling is in favor of the men. But through SASA Faith, we've enhanced the skills of the religious leaders to ensure that their counseling is balanced, and it comes from understanding the survivor. Next slide, please. We've also have media products that we've done with the religious leaders.
As the leaders of Zimbabwe Christian churches, we unite to condemn the silent epidemic of violence against women and girls.
The Bible encourages us to live in peace, love, and dignity.
If you suffer from or see violence against women and girls, it is time to speak out.
So these are some of the media products and the commitments that we have secured from the very top heads of Christian denominations, but we've also worked in other countries to secure their commitments to end violence against women. Next slide, please. So we have also embarked on a learning journey and documented some of the work that we have done in SASA Faith in our work with religious leaders through various learning pieces. And what we have learned from these learning pieces is that the religion has the power to change social norms. And when we work with religious leaders, they have the power to influence, especially the men, in coming on board and becoming our allies in the fight against gender-based violence. We've also learned that continuous and repetitive engagement of communities brings about social norms change. It also brings about support for survivors within safe spaces, and it also ensures that there are practical solutions that are given to the survivors of gender-based violence within the faith space. We've also, next slide, we've also adapted some of the SASA Faith initiatives to work in different scenarios where religious leaders have, may you please put the next slide? We have worked with religious leaders during COVID-19. We have digitalized some of our sessions so that they can reach out to people even in emergency settings. And we've also looked at ending child marriages through our work with religious leaders and supporting survivors of child marriage through twinning our SASA Faith work and our work with religious leaders with the inquiry-based stress reduction. We've also implemented SASA Faith in a project with SRHR and young people in order to create an enabling environment for them to access SRHR information. Next slide, please. SASA Faith has been implemented in 6 countries so far, and is currently being implemented in Zimbabwe and Malawi. And what we have also seen is that religious leaders, when engaged, are willing to come on board, and they have the power to actually bring about lasting and sustainable change. We have done a 6-year cycle with SASA Faith, and to this date, some of our communities that we have engaged through 2017, they're still using the SASA Faith values in their faith spaces. And we've seen that religious leaders are still taking on the discussion guides that we have provided them 6 years back. So we have seen that it's a really sustainable way of ensuring that there's support to gender-based violence survivors, there's family integration, and overall there's justice, peace, and dignity in the communities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laurel. I appreciate that. I think you saw I just put on my mic, so it worked out really well on timing. I see we have a lot of questions in the chat. We probably won't get to all of them because we do have our other presenter coming on now. So I'm going to close writing questions at this point, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for Dr. Lydia as well from the from the All Africa Conferences of Churches, who's going to build off of Laurel's presentation and talk a little bit about the impact that GBV has on widows and how faith-based leaders can help impact that particular population group as well. So Laurel, thank you so much for that great presentation. I'm not sure if you could see in the chat, but we had a lot of questions, and I have noted those that I think we can do in the Q&A. And I'll turn it now over to Dr. Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and thank you, Laura, for your presentation. As Jessica has said, I'm presenting on how All Africa Conference of Churches is engaging religious leaders to address the plight of widows in the continent, and especially through the toolkit, the advocacy toolkit for justice for widows that AACC has developed. I'm the Director, Gender and Women at the AACC. I'm also a priest in the Anglican Church of Kenya, Diocese of Nairobi, and I'm also a member of UN Women CS Civil Society Regional Reference Group. Please, let's move on, please, to the next, please. Now, this discussion is very timely because we have just commemorated the International Widows Day on 23rd June, because the plight of widows is a global concern which has drawn the attention of the UN. And in 2010, the UN set apart 23rd June as the International Widows Day to create awareness of the violations of human rights that widows are suffering, and also to call for more research into the plight of widows. Next, please. So we are going to look at the experiences of widows in Africa, and I need to say that these experiences differ from community or from one community to another, one country to another, but some are related. And so what I'm going to present here may not apply to you or may apply to your community. Widows are facing several abuses or GBV. They are exposed to several forms of GBV, and these ones include, but they are not limited to, being forced to sleep with the dead body of her husband, being forced to drink water that has washed the dead body of the husband as a proof that the widow is not the cause of her husband's death. Then there is widow cleansing, and this in these communities involves having the widow to have sex with somebody called the cleanser in the village, and this is somebody who is not mentally stable, sometimes a madman. Move on, please. Again, there is widow inheritance and also disinheritance, where everything is taken away from the widow by the husband's relatives. Then denial of inheritance and land rights. Sometimes some customary laws indicate that the son should be the one to inherit, and then the mother lives at the mercies of the boy child or even the senior male in that family. Then there is eviction from the late husband's home that has happened to several widows. Stigma, because they are accused of being witches. Any husband who dies, the wife is said to be the cause. Again, widows are really stigmatized because they are said to be prostitutes. And then in many communities, there are these restrictive remarriage laws where the widow's family is required to return all the dowry before she can remarry. So how has the All Africa Conference of Churches responded? Next, please. Next, please. So I begin by introducing the All Africa Conference of Churches, which is a fellowship of Anglicans, Protestants, Orthodox, and African instituted churches in Africa. So it is the largest fellowship of churches in Africa, and it collaborates with other religious organizations, faith-based, AU, UN, multilateral bodies, etc. Our headquarters are in Nairobi, Westlands, but we also have a liaison office at the African Union that does advocacy at the African Union, and also another regional office in Togo to take care of our French speakers. So AACC launched a Justice for Widows campaign in 2019 to create awareness of the plight of widows and call for churches and other stakeholders to action. Next, please. So this campaign has been popularized in different ways. These are just some of them. For example, we commemorate the International Widows Day since 2019 when the campaign was launched in Malawi. So, like, for example, in 2022, we were in Malawi. Sorry, the campaign was launched in Zambia, not in Malawi. In 2022, we held a huge commemoration of International Widows Day just to create awareness of the day and the plight of widows in Malawi and look at the legal instruments. And then last year we were in Togo, where we also carried out the International Widows Day and engaged religious leaders in Togo. Next, please. Our campaign is also carried out through small grants, giving small grants to support socioeconomic empowerment of widows in different churches. And you can see the widows through these grants getting training on entrepreneurship, and they are able to make detergents, they are able to make bags, hats, and many other things. And this one is very recent because these photos were captured on 23rd June in Zimbabwe, where AACC commemorated the International Widows Day. And some of these women are taking their items, even in the shows, national shows, they are able to showcase their items, and they are transforming their economic and social lives through these small grants. Next, please. The campaign is also popularized through the advocacy toolkit for justice for widows, and I hope that link will be provided so that if you go to Google, you can Google the whole toolkit, which is both in French and in English. And the toolkit was launched on 8th March, International Women's Day 2022 by AACC. Next, please. So I'll just be brief about the content. In chapter 1, it focuses on advocacy and churches. Sometimes churches might wonder why they should do advocacy, but meanwhile, we have several biblical texts that focus on advocacy. And those texts now can lead us into doing advocacy. And when we talk about biblical texts, the toolkit, although is focusing on biblical texts. When we are dealing with other religions, we encourage them to look at their religious texts as an entry point into doing advocacy, and especially advocacy for the rights of widows. In chapter 2, it is advocacy and widows and advocacy. It introduces advocacy and why advocacy for widows. What does the Bible say about widows? And specifically looking at those biblical verses that advocate for widows' rights. Next, please. In chapter 3, we are looking at the key issues facing widows. What I have highlighted above is just some of the GBV experiences of widows, but the toolkit brings many more challenges and in a little more detailed way. So if you look at the toolkit in that chapter, you'll see some of the key issues facing widows, including the legal, the customary and religious laws and how they are affecting widows even very, very negatively. Chapter 4 looks into the frameworks for protection of widows' rights. There are several frameworks in UN frameworks, Africa legal frameworks, and even at national level. So when we are doing the training, we ask the participants, first of all, to look at the legal frameworks at the national level and apply them. And also, the toolkit lists several UN frameworks and also those at the African or at the continental level. Thank you. Next. Chapter 5 is looking at existing interventions done by different stakeholders, and you will see them, what different stakeholders are doing about the plight of widows. And chapter 6 is advocacy strategies and emphasizing on the campaign for will writing, litigation, advocating for policy and legal framework change, capacity building of widows and stakeholders. It really guides on the different methodologies or strategies that can be undertaken to advocate for the rights of widows. Next. Next, please. So how are we rolling out the toolkit? We have different ways of rolling out the toolkit. First of all, when this toolkit was developed, we had and we have been having online training of trainers meetings, mainly training the religious leaders who are in charge of gender programs so that they can be able to train other leaders in their communities. And it is worth mentioning that this toolkit was developed by a team of people representing every region in the AACC constituency, where we have 5 regions. And then we had a consultant who is a legal practitioner, an advocate, Gloria Mafole from Tanzania. So it has lots of, a bit of legal language, but quite simplified, so that those who are being trained can be able to get the language. Then we also roll out the toolkit through presentations during the International Widows Day. We usually take advantage of this International Widows Day to train or to present the toolkit and how leaders can use it to teach or to train the widows and even other women and other church leaders on its use, or how to use it. Next, please. We also have established 6 platforms of male champions for gender justice in different countries like Malawi, Nigeria, Uganda, DRC, Cameroon, and Togo. And we are training our male champions really to use the toolkit to advocate for the rights of widows. And indeed, men need to be involved. As one man said, and as one church leader said in Zimbabwe, that they will train men, they will engage men, because usually what happens, a man labors throughout his life to look for inheritance for his family. But when he is gone, the family does not inherit. It's other people who come, and the family is scattered, and the wives and the children may not be able to inherit anything. So we are training men really to creating awareness about the plight of widows, and also training them on the use of the toolkit and the legal instruments involved. And then last year we had the Women's Pre-Assembly coming at the 12th General Assembly of the All Africa Conference of Churches in Nigeria in October. And we had an opportunity to present the toolkit to those very, very many church leaders who are there. So these are some of the ways. Next, how we are popularizing the toolkit, and we wish we could be able to bring more leaders together, even at regional levels, for in-person training, because in-person training helps a lot. So our toolkit has been very effective because it is simple, and after every chapter has objectives and equations that really help people to contextualize the information or whatever they are learning within their own contexts. And the toolkit also equips widows with agency to speak out and pursue their rights through the legal frameworks. One recommendation I would give to UNFPA is to consider conducting more research about the plight of widows in different communities in the continent, available legal frameworks or interventions, and also look into customary and religious laws and how they affect widows' rights and dignity. Now, I am very, very passionate about the rights and justice for widows, because I am a widow myself for the last 20 years. Since 2004, my husband, who was a priest in the Anglican Church, died suddenly, and I was left at a younger age with children aged 10, 12, and 14. So I really urge everyone to look into the plight of widows within your own interventions. Please look into ways of engaging or bringing in this topic about taking care of widows and their rights, because widows have been marginalized even by policymakers when they make policies for other citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lydia. for that really interesting presentation. And as you mentioned, a group that is often marginalized, even within the GBV community, I think. And so it's really great that the Council of Churches is highlighting the specific vulnerability of widows, but also more importantly, creating the advocacy toolkit. Before we get to some of the questions, I do want to just reinforce that you can find a recording of this webinar, which obviously includes these PowerPoints, on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to ask if Karen could please put the link again in the chat. We do have your email addresses already. So just note that usually we also send the link out to all of those who have registered. Just because I know this was also asked quite a bit, you can find the Sasa Faith Toolkit online on the Raising Voices website, and then also on Trocar's website. But maybe Karen, thanks. If you could also put the link to the Raising Voices. They have Sasa toolkits, not only for faith-based leaders, but for community leaders as well. And then also generally across many others. So it's a great, if you're looking at prevention, Sasa, and more importantly, Raising Voices is an amazing organization based in Uganda that started more locally and is now globally recognized in the field of GBV prevention and response in a way of all these great tools. So just to note that, because there were lots of questions around that. And Karen did put the link to our YouTube channel, and then also she's going to put the link to the Sasa or Raising Voices website as well. And I think that Laurel also put the links to the Trocar website. Great. Thank you so much. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. And I'm going to start with a question for both Dr. Lydia and Laurel. And that was, how do you select the faith-based leaders who are participating in your programs? And I'm going to combine two questions, because another one of our participants had mentioned that often faith-based leaders have to overcome their own biases. They're certainly growing up and existing in these same cultures with these norms that often are not proactive or in recognizing women's rights. So the first is, how do you select these faith-based leaders, ensuring that they are not inadvertently harming women and girls and communities through their work, and knowing that they would have to also overcome their own biases. And I'm going to add one more on to this one, because I didn't think of this, and I think it was Mohammed who mentioned this one about, what about also engaging female faith leaders? And have you noticed any differences or any challenges with ensuring that we also have equal representation of female faith leaders, since we often associate faith-based leaders as men? And so I'm happy that we have Dr. Lydia and also Laurel to be able, two amazingly strong women, to also address that question as well. So I'll start with Laurel, if you want to start with this, and then I'll turn over to Dr. Lydia. Go ahead, Laurel.
Thank you very much, Jessica. So to answer the last question, yes, we do engage both male and female religious leaders. And when we go to a community, we look for, when we do our community mapping, we identify the faith spaces that has the largest population, because we obviously cannot cover the wide range. So we don't have a specific religion or organization that we target, but we look at who has the most population in that area. So if we're going to work with probably 7 faith spaces, we will choose those that have the largest. Those will engage directly, and then the smaller ones will be engaged indirectly. And in terms of overcoming their own biases, in the first 6 months of SASA Faith, we work extensively with the religious leaders and the community volunteers that will roll out the programs in the faith spaces. So it's more like around personal reflection, exploring their own beliefs as religious leaders before we ask them to then engage their faith community. So there's like a 6 months incubation period before they then go out to the larger community. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurel. I'm going to also ask Dr. Lydia that same question, but then if you could also, Dr. Lydia, speak a little bit about the engagement of female faith leaders, and if you see a difference or a challenge in that area as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and this is a very important question. First of all, how we select the religious leaders, we work with and through our member churches. So for example, when we were establishing the 6 platforms of male champions for gender justice, we identify key church leaders who are influential within their churches and good standing. And we ask them to identify at least 10 men who can champion gender justice. And these are not just religious leaders, they are not just church leaders, but they are also leaders within their communities, including leaders from other faiths and also traditional leaders. Because as we do not go to the ground and we do not know them, we involve our church leaders to bring together those religious leaders. To bring together religious and traditional leaders to champion, to form a group that champions gender justice within that community or within that country. That is how we work. Again, engaging female faith leaders, we do that quite a lot also because I'm a faith leader, I'm a female faith leader and a theologian. And I need to say that AACC does more than just the focus on widows. We have other programs like enhancing women's participation in church leadership. And that campaign is carried out especially both by male and female leaders. Also the issue of widows. In fact, the entry point are our gender desks, which are mainly manned by which are mainly championed by the female leaders. They are the heads of gender desks. So we don't really discriminate. We brought in the male perspective or the male champions because we realize that advocacy for gender work is mainly done by women, and so it is ignored by men. And so we decided to bring men as allies. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Lydia. Well received. I think we have time for one more question. And I want to talk about, I think, Laurel, you had put this in the chat, but I think maybe for both of our speakers, how are you measuring the impact of your interventions? Because I know this is important to a lot of our partners who are listening today to understand how you would measure impact, particularly when we're talking about behavior change and longer term norms change. So Dr. Lydia, if you want to start, and then we'll go to Laurel.
Thank you very much. Measuring impact. Sometimes it takes long to be able to measure impact, but I must say that our our campaign for justice for widows has borne fruit because we can see more churches than before commemorating the International Widows Day, and also coming up with the programs for justice for widows. And then we can see transformation of widows' lives. For example, I was in Zimbabwe on Sunday, and those widows were giving testimonies, you know, those sharing success stories of how their lives were before they were trained through the grant that we gave them, and how their lives have transformed, especially economically. So I can say that there is progress in that, although maybe we need to do more in that area of measuring impact. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Lydia. And then Laurel, I'll ask the same question to you about measuring impact, and then we will close. Over to you, Laurel.
Thank you, Jessica. So yes, we have conducted a study on our SASA faith journey over the 6 years. And the resources are available on the Chokra website of that report. And we've also done say 2 other studies on our work on SASA faith within the COVID-19, and also a sort of like a longitudinal study of the women that we have been working with in Malawi on SASA faith. So all these have really brought out the results of the impact of our work with religious leaders and the faith communities, and how we can harness religion to prevent interfaith partner violence. Currently, we've also embarked on a longitudinal study for our current cohort in Zimbabwe and Malawi, just to ensure that we continue learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurel. And I know that you also shared a link to some of those resources. So thank you very much. We are now at the end of our hour, and I really want to thank Dr. Lydia from the All Council Churches, and then also Laurel from Trocaire for joining us today. We really much appreciate all of the practical tools that you presented. Just to please note, we have been putting the links in the chat for the SASA toolkit. And as I mentioned, SASA, which was developed by Raising Voices, they also have other tools available on their website that are really well and globally known. But we do, and they do actually really recommend that you do a foundational training in order to understand some of the nuances of rolling those out. So just to state that, on behalf, and we will share the link to the recording, which you can also find on our website, or our YouTube channel, and all of these other resources as well. And if you're looking for additional resources on working with religious leaders or any other types of capacity building resources on GBV, you can find those on our website, which is gbvaor.net. So thank you everybody for joining us. This is the June edition of our Emerging Practice webinar series. We really look forward to seeing you all online next month for our next topic. And hopefully next month we'll also be able to provide simultaneous translation into multiple different languages. We've heard you, especially our French colleagues, and we hope to be able to provide that as well, thanks to UNICEF. So thank you all, everyone. It's really great to see you all online, and I hope you have a good afternoon and a better weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.